Welcome to the third class of the County Mental Health Law Plan. Today, we will have with us Judge James Henderson from Grayson County, Judge Tamara Needles, and Judge Leon Grizzard from Travis County. And we are trying to present two different views. Judge Henderson in a smaller county, a little bit more rural. I don't know if they can call themselves rural anymore. It's growing. And then Travis County, a more urban perspective. So we are going to be talking about mental health courts. And here are our esteemed guests. The way we have it planned today is that I have a PowerPoint with some basic information, and then we will be turning to our expert judges to hear their real life experience. Okay, so I want to start with why mental health courts. We have a video here.
My name is Amber McCutcheon, and I am a graduate of the Mental Health Diversion Program. I used to get into a lot of trouble. I was in and out of just petty crimes. When I would get into trouble and I would get arrested, I would get bailed out like just as soon as I went in. But the very last time that I did not get bailed out. And so I got booked into, the county jail. And my attorney came and saw me and he said, I'm not doing this anymore. You either get your stuff together or, you're gonna go to prison. My life was slowly just kind of going down this spiral. And of course I didn't see it at the time, but my attorney, who I didn't know worked really closely with this program, did. It was really exciting just to think about where I started. I mean, I started pretty much homeless in a jail cell, going through serious withdrawals, knowing that I needed a change, but kind of one foot in the door, one foot not, out of the door. They were just very supportive. I don't think that my life would be completely different if it wasn't for this program, completely different. They literally saved my life.
It's one of those, moving testimonies that I think are really important when you have a program to try to start capturing some of that, because the data on mental health courts is not awesome. We have some data, and I have two studies that I found that say it's effective, but it's a newer model. The research was based on our drug court models. We have tons of research saying drug courts work, right? We have lots of anecdotes from mental health courts. But the research that specifically says that mental health courts work, it's not out there as much. So one thing I thought that was helpful is All Rise has recently lumped mental health courts together with their drug courts, and they're calling them treatment courts, and saying that any of the research that applies to drug courts, the best practice standards apply to mental health courts is what they have found in their research. So I found that helpful. Another point to talk about is that there's some criticism of mental health courts. And I was surprised by this because I think it's an awesome model and I was very excited to be involved in it. And then I had some pushback. And what I've decided is that there is merit to the pushback, that we don't want to be investing all of our funding later in the sequential intercept model, that early intervention is really important. But I don't think it's an either or. I think it's both and. I think that we need to be focusing on early intervention, and mental health courts are really important because, as all of you know, you have people right in front of you that weren't prevented from going further into the system. And until we get to the point where that prevention is really slowing down that train, we need to have the mental health courts to help the people that are already in our courts. I also wanted to point out that there's more flexibility than some people perceive. We've had people say that they're intimidated to start a mental health court because they feel like it has to be a full-blown court, that it has to be 5 days a week or a totally dedicated judge. And I actually don't even know any programs like that in the state. The ones that we call mental health courts are typically dockets. So it is typically a judge who has a passion for this, clears out time in their schedule, Tuesdays and Thursdays or whatever works, and makes a mental health docket with those relationships with the local mental health authority, probation, and others. And also wanted to say that if you have a particular need in your community for first responders, traffic people, veterans, that those really fall under that umbrella of specialty courts. They're meeting a lot of the same needs. And so mental health court is not the only model. The co-occurring model is also very effective. So this is the slide that I was talking about that has some research. So we did find a couple of studies that are specific for mental health courts. One said that there's a 74% decrease in recidivism, and the next said that it found that there's greater distance between rearrest and also fewer rearrests with mental health court. So these are some Texas-specific statistics. We have 52 counties with one or more specialty court, only 25 courts with one mental health court program. You can see 27 adult and 11 juvenile programs. I know this is changing, so I have lists coming up of the counties that we know that are participating. And if you know you have an emerging program, then please let us know and we'll add you to this list. So this is what we know about adult mental health courts. And there is a statute requiring any counties with populations of over 200,000 to create an adult mental health court. It isn't clear if a juvenile, it doesn't say adult mental health court, it just says mental health court. So it isn't clear if a juvenile mental health court meets that requirement, but here are the counties that have a juvenile mental health court. Okay, so we wanted to talk with our judges as we go through the mental health court 10-step guide. This is a document and a video that was created on our website for people that are just getting started with their program. So the very first thing to think about is to think about your concept. What kind of court are you going to have? Is it going to be pre-adjudication, post-adjudication? And there is a definition in the government code of what a mental health court program is. This is the one that if you were unable to attend the first meeting where we talked about civil commitment, we discussed the idea of opening up that definition to include assisted outpatient treatment courts, which you know come earlier in the cycle and are typically run by probate judges. So there right now are a few limitations in that definition. Like, for example, it says defendants. And in an AOT court, right, you may not always be dealing with someone who has already crossed into the criminal justice system. So we are wondering if that is something that could be legislatively adjusted to include AOT courts in that definition, because that definition defines who is eligible to apply for the state funding for mental health courts or specialty courts.
I think as Christy said a little bit earlier, you know, Grayson County is not really a rural county. We're a little bit bigger than that, and we're growing. But the issues that we have, I think, are that we really do not have the established services here in our county, either in the court side or really in the social services side that they have in a lot of larger counties like Travis County. And so that's really what kind of presents issues for us. You know, there's a lot of turnover in the LMHA, at the jail, at the district attorney's office. And so we really wear a lot of hats here. And so what our primary issue was that we needed to address, I think, was the number of mentally ill individuals who are presented in our jail. And they're presented in our jail because really in our county, there's no real established resources to be used kind of at the street patrol officer level. And so that's really what our situation has been. And so our efforts have really been to try to identify these individuals very early and to get them up in court and to kind of get them connected with people on the legal side, people on the social services side, who can try to establish a pathway for them to, first of all, get out of jail, and then, if possible, provide social support networks for them. I think one of the things that Christy said earlier is really pretty interesting as far as whether you focus on early intervention or later intervention. And I think what we've seen is that a lot of these people in the early stages are really not capable of entering like a mental health docket and comply with a lot of the requirements for successful movement through a mental health docket. And so we've really tried to focus on, the initial stages and where we have an opportunity to put greater conditions on certain individuals. We kind of treat those on a case by case basis and work through our adult probation office to do that. Really what we have is just a docket that exists on the county court at law side to handle the misdemeanors. And then there's another docket that's conducted by one of our district judges to handle, more serious mental health concerns. In a county like ours, where you have justices of the peace who do arraignments, you have two primarily large cities, Denison and Sherman, then a lot of smaller cities where you have like a lot of overlapping jurisdictional responsibilities. That's what presents a challenge for us. And so as we kind of spend some time together here this afternoon, I'd kind of like to hear what questions and concerns people in counties similar to ours have, because we don't have the resources that the larger counties do. So we do as best we can with the resources and the challenges that we have.
Thank you. Judge Grizzard?
Judge Needles is the district judge who is sort of the policy person that goes to the group meetings and that type of thing. And I'm sort of the boots on the ground of the judiciary for the felony side. I'm the Travis County District Court's criminal law magistrate. We started kind of with nothing. We just simply started having a prosecutor who was assigned to become educated and knowledgeable about mental health issues and criminal defendants. And me, I do have a background in specialty courts with a drug court program. And we just started a docket. We'd never have called it a court. We now have something we actually call a court, but we just have programs and would try to bring initially just sort of thoughtful dispositions to defendants with mental health conditions that impacted their behavior. We got our local defense organization, our managed assigned counsel program, to require mental health training for all the lawyers, and we have developed a wheel of sort of specialized or much more knowledgeable mental health attorneys. So we just kind of started it like that. The precedent was Judge Julie Kasurik had what was called support court for probationers with mental health conditions that were kind of about to get revoked, and would bring those in. And we run it just like a drug court program or other specialty court program would be, coming before the court on a regular basis in a non-adversarial session with the prosecutor and the defense attorney and me, the probation officer or a probation officer on the support court, but no other support in terms of our docket. The next step was what we kind of informally referred to as wait and see, which is releasing people on bond, steering them or getting the defense lawyer and whoever to get them connected with our mental health authority, Integral Care here in Travis County, and coming back to court to tell us about what they are doing and trying to make sure that they are staying connected or getting and staying connected. Our overall practice, our overall goal is to get people receiving services from the local mental health authority. We are not trying to provide those services ourselves. We want to shift this stuff away from the jail and the criminal justice system onto civil processes. And that is the overriding process that we have tried to use. So our program, we now actually have a bells and whistles mental health court program after 13 years of my doing this. We actually have a program that has 2 dedicated social workers, a peer support specialist. We still do not have case management. We leave that to the social workers who don't want to act as snitches, but I make it a bond condition for everybody in our programs that they receive mental health services in the community, follow all the recommendations, no new arrests, and report bond compliance to court. So it puts them, if they want to get out on that personal bond, or even if they're on a surety bond, they're required to self-report with their attorney what they are doing in terms of mental health services. I think most people are fairly honest about it. They will own it, or you can tell if people are hemming and hawing about it, that they probably are not doing that. And so we've managed to do it pretty much on the cheap. And so that's what I guess I would say. We have 4 dockets that I do, 3 actually for purposes of this. We have the specialty docket, which is sort of the initial thing, what we had that was our wait and see, just people getting a thoughtful disposition based on what the person was doing after they were released on bond, or giving them a thoughtful disposition while in jail. We have most of our cases, we have about 100 cases on diversion. This is just using the regular old diversion statute in the government code. Generally, people are being with the DA's office 6 months to a year, something like that. A lot of people will finish early. About the same thing as I say as bond conditions: receive mental health services, follow all the recommendations, including medications, report compliance to court. There will sometimes be some counseling requirements there, but we mainly want people to get hooked up with the civil mental health authorities and get their services through them, rather through the court trying to case manage or provide the services ourselves.
Thank you, Judge. So to clarify, it sounds like you have a mix. Are they all post-adjudication? Are some pre-adjudication?
No, everything is pre-adjudication.
Everything is
pre-adjudication except for the support court cases, who are people who are on probation and a lot of times have not really been identified. I guess some people are on the mental health caseload, but some are not, and their mental health conditions have become apparent with them being on probation. So we do have some post-adjudication folks, but almost everybody here is pre-adjudication, pre-trial diversion, and our mental health court docket, which is only about 15 people, is pre-adjudication.
Okay, thank you.
I think honestly, in larger counties like we have, and with the judges that we have on the district side handling the felonies, and the misdemeanor side, the county court at law judges, it would sometimes be that thoughtful intervention that Judge Grizzard talks about that the regular judges wouldn't have time for necessarily. I mean, we carry a caseload on the district court side of around 1,300. I call them clients still because I come from a defense side, but I guess you'd say really defendants. And district court judges just don't have that opportunity, nor did we have the personnel that was doing the holistic approach with us in our courtrooms every day. And so Judge Grizzard coming on board and way back, like I said, before I was even on the bench, and kind of handling the commitments and then handling those with special needs, I think it was a real help for the district courts to be able to send those folks with mental health needs to one space. And then that developed into Judge Grizzard getting all the services together, getting the mental health court DAs, getting the integral care local mental health authority in. And Judge Grizzard, correct me if I'm wrong, but before, when Jeff Futrell was with us on this earth from the jail, he and his team from the jail would be very active as well in that. So you correct? And I assume
and
everybody's still there, right?
Yeah, you know what, I guess I'm leaving out, some stuff I've talked about, just kind of the court end, but we have great cooperation and collaboration between the jail medical staff, and our docket, who can tell us who is started on medications, who has not. The jail is the entity that initially was making referrals. There's a lot of people that are put on our mental health docket, just our specialty docket, the entry docket, that are identified and are automatically put on the docket. And these are people that have been through our courts many times before, jail many times before. So we have also, over time, have gotten it so that our local mental health authority can interview and do intakes with people in jail, so people can leave jail now having an appointment with Integral Care. And so that has been a big help as well. You know, making that initial contact is one of the biggest challenges that we have. At staffing before COVID, we actually had a representative. We had pre-court staffings on my docket, and we would have a representative from Integral Care, our local mental health authority, there at the docket. They obviously can't talk to me about it or the prosecutor about it, but they are there, and we have an order ordering them to give access to some information to the attorney, and so the attorney could, depending on what they felt was in the best interest of their client, share some of that information, whether they are making those contacts and appointments, have been prescribed medications or not. I have 3 dockets a week, excluding the mental health court docket, which is a separate one. And we have a representative from our local mental health authority there on one of those dockets that provides that same information to the attorneys and acts sort of as a general resource for us in terms of what is available in general for people and tell us about process and that type of thing. What Judge Needles is, she goes to meetings where all of the players, the EMS, fire department, the police department, everybody is there to talk about and to try to coordinate our efforts, so we are working together and not duplicating efforts. And so that's one of the big things, and that doesn't cost anything at all to do. You got to get people there or a representative there, but that's been a big thing for us.
I was going to say, and just quite quickly, is that what was it's what Judge Grizzard had said earlier, and what you were kind of talking about, how did we start? It was a very kind of organic need process. And so we have contemplated having a district court judge apply for OCA, specialty court recognition. But once we started looking closer into that and what maybe there might be funding or whatever we needed, we kind of discerned on the district court side of the house was Judge Grizzard fits all those needs. We've already got that in place. And so to speak to some of maybe the folks from smaller counties, I don't think you have to think, oh gosh, I've got to go apply for this, or oh gosh, I've got to have a big budget for this. We just kind of piecemealed it together, and it's become what it is, and I think is perfect for us because it's kind of the one-stop shop. We know Judge Grizzard, who's our magistrate judge as opposed to an elected district judge, knows how to handle all of those things, and that takes that into a realm where he can focus more of his time as opposed to what a district court would look like.
Okay, yes, let's try to break it down. It's a lot. That it sounds like you guys have incorporated all of the best practices in this one judge, and you earned that reputation to be the go-to. And so you're doing things beyond just admitting people into a certain program. You have a lot of those best practices at work.
We don't have all of them. We don't do a risk needs assessment at the front end. We want the local mental health authority to be doing that instead. We've had pushback from the mental health bar on doing that for fear some of the stuff that comes out there may bite them at a later time. And so we're not 100% down the line with I want to say the so-called best practices, but the recognized best practices, because we don't have to, because we're not a court, we're not a official state of Texas recognized mental health court with all of their requirements. It's given us flexibility. We don't have to keep people for 6 months in the program. If they're doing great and we want to cut them loose earlier, we can do that. And so we have some more flexibility perhaps than if we were down the line by the book.
Interesting. So that's a different perspective to say that you are not registered with OCA as an official mental health court program, provides some flexibility. You could probably still meet the definition. I don't know that for sure, but I'm guessing for federal funding, but for state funding, you have to meet that definition.
Right.
Judge Henderson, is your program pre-adjudication?
Well, I think we have a little bit of both. In smaller counties, like I said, you have to wear a lot of hats. And so we don't have just a lot of people that come through this system. We try to be very selective in putting people on a more formal supervision track to ensure that they're successful, because so many people that we encounter don't have any sort of natural supports. They have very little expectation of being successful on it. But as we find those people, we sometimes will put them on something different than the mental health caseload that our adult probation has. So we have a little bit of a combination, but it's really mostly through, say, the traditional probation supervision for individuals with special needs and mental health needs.
Post adjudication, but maybe some open and flexible.
And Christy, I
Yeah.
just wanted to add to that because I know Judge Grizzard spoke to that when we talk about a diversion, to make sure that we're all using the same lingo for it, because there's deflection, there's diversion. It's not as deflection as I would like, obviously, because they've been arrested and in the system. But those diversions, when we speak of diversion, that means that that ends in a dismissal, not a deferred adjudication, not a regular probation. Kind of like what Judge Henderson is saying, that's more traditional what they use. We've been fortunate with the collaboration of services, which I think is the biggest key in Travis County, is having all the people, all the wraparound services right there, that we are able to offer dismissal at the end of it on this 6 months to a year basis. But yet it doesn't have to be cookie cutter, you know. And also what Judge Grizzard is saying is that if they are on probation and have later, once on probation, realized, gosh, we have a huge mental health problem with this person, that they're just not functioning, but they're already on a second-degree felony probation, they need some help. And so we're able to assist those people as well as offer a diversion dismissal kind of track as well. And two, we're speaking a lot on the felony side, but we do have 2 misdemeanor courts that are OCA approved as mental health courts. And those 2 judges run one that handles those that are incarcerated and one that handles those persons on bond. And those are for all of our misdemeanor cases, which is really, we really are very fortunate in Travis County to have that many judges to be able to handle that many folks in need.
All right, well, Judge Carr, did you want to tell us briefly about your program since we have you here?
Sure. I started my program in 2003. I'm retired. I retired a year ago, January, so I do jurist and residence work for the commission. It was a it's a pre-adjudication program. Although we have had people on probation from time to time, I never got so worried about mixing and matching the high risk, moderate or lower risk people, because really the only time the group is together is in the courtroom. And as far as their counseling and treatment, I mean, you have to be more concerned about those things when if they're in group counseling or seeing some of the services they receive. But the courtroom setting, that really has not posed much of a challenge. The program remains vibrant and intact. I think we've maintained a census of on the high end up to 50 some odd people. It has gotten down to as low as 30. Sometimes I also ran a few other programs in addition to my elected responsibilities. But I think the mental health program our program is probably pushing about, I don't know, 700 to 800 graduates by now. All of my programs are probably pushing about 2,000 graduates. These programs were certainly the thing towards the end of my 32-year judicial career, where I found I was very interested in them. I have studied them, researched them, and I'm just pleased to have the opportunity to continue doing a little bit of work in this field. This is great work, and you know, I'll close with we're certainly very good at punishment, and certainly that's called for in many cases. But I mean, who doesn't enjoy seeing people dig themselves out of a hole and go on to restore themselves and have a meaningful life, get reunited with families, children, work, uh, many of the things that we take for granted. So there is a growing body of research now. We're no longer trying to figure out necessarily which end is up. And there's plenty of resources out there. And the Judicial Commission on Mental Health we are a leading entity with there are very few states that have an organization such as this, and in my personal experiences, it has been a great place to bring together many people who were concerned in this issue, and we are very fortunate to have the dedicated group of professionals that I see working in this area on a regular basis.
Thank you, Judge. Okay, we have a few questions in the chat, but I'm gonna hold those till we get to the part in the 10 steps. So let's move on. Okay, so the next step is to collect the data. And what we advise, and we did a study of all of the best practices out there, is to look at what data already exists. So obviously that would be the easiest to start with. What data is needed, maybe your grant requires certain data points, and then to develop a data plan. We have some data points, a long list of data points that our data committee is working on at JCMH that we can share with you. But some things to think about, I like to group them into these categories because it can be overwhelming. But to think about the participants, what kind of data are you keeping about who's coming through your program? And the length of time between key decision points. What kind of services are being offered? That's a different set of data that you can keep. And did they engage in the services? Were they helpful? You can look at success in a lot of different ways, but there are criminal justice outcomes. We obviously think about recidivism, the number of admissions to state hospitals, the number of admissions back to jail. And then you can also look at it through mental health outcomes. So were there changes in symptoms? Were there changes in the number of emergency room appointments? Days that they experienced homelessness. So a lot out there that you can consider. We think it's important to track some data because you will be asked to show how effective your program is at some point when you are trying to seek funding. So one other point that we would add is tracking data on race. Harder to do than it might seem. When I first started to hear about this, I thought, well, it seems like that's something you could mark down pretty easily. But I know Travis County, and even developing its dashboard, went through a lot of discussions and difficulties that made me remember that when you do fill out questionnaires about race, that it drops down into a lot of specifics about the different combinations of race, and if you are Latin, if you're non-white, and that it is a little bit more difficult than it seems. But there has been evidence to show that we are sometimes gatekeeping, maybe I'm sure it's not conscious, but that there may be more people that are white that are attending and being allowed these types of special courts. And so that's something to pay attention to and to at least start to be aware of, and to think about what is your referral process and what's your decision-making process on who qualifies, and to make sure that you have criteria that are unbiased. So, okay, I'll go on and then come back to the judges. That there's a recommended team: judge, defense attorney, prosecutor, supervision officer. And I think you heard earlier some judges saying, we don't have a case manager. What we have is a contact at the local mental health authority, and they are seeing clients they were already going to see. Now they are just doing it with a partner of the judiciary, and hopefully, increasing the success of that. So one of the questions that we have is, do you have a designated contact at the LMHA to coordinate the referral for mental health services? Do we have any of our judges that want to jump in on that?
We do. I mean, we have a couple. As I've mentioned, we have a representative at our docket on Tuesday. We also have an email contacts where people can make appointments And they can also, our local mental health authority refers to defense attorney inquiries via email as well. So we certainly have that.
Great.
We
that
don't
was-
have that for all of the service providers. Integral Care is not the only one in Travis County, but they're the overwhelming majority. And so we're pretty well taken care of. We do rely on some self-reporting, as I said, in terms of people doing what they have been told to do for the programs.
Thank you, Judge. I'm taking notes. Will you explain what that defense attorney inquiry is? That's like an email service?
Well, yeah, they can, we have a point of contact where we have a order, all of the attorneys that are wheel attorneys or people who are representing a defendant on one of our dockets. We designate them as an attorney that is knowledgeable about the issues and orders the jail medical and the local mental health authority to disclose certain information to them, which they can then disclose or not, depending on what they think is in the best interest of their client. So the attorneys have a way to find out some of that information. Did they make their provider appointment on February the 8th? That type of thing or not.
Great. Judge Henderson?
Well, I would really have a couple of areas here that I think are important for people to understand. In Grayson County, I think that in our mental health, the way that our courts address mental health moved way, way, way ahead when we were able to get the grant from JCMH to get us a mental health diversion coordinator. Because this young lady is someone who has experience in the field of mental health services from kind of the LMHA angle. And she is able to like coordinate communication to allow the LMHA people to kind of understand what we need from the legal side. And she's able to establish relationships with our defense bar, with our prosecutors, with our judges to help educate everybody on the legal side about what is available in the LMHA. And I think that's something that was extremely important in our county, where there really was no communication and then a lot of times no awareness of what the other side was doing or what the other side needed to do to kind of process individuals with mental health needs through the criminal justice system. And so that was a very important thing for us to make progress. I think in small counties like ours, one of the advantages that we have is that we're small enough to know each other, you know. So when you say a contact person in the LMHA, well, like I know everybody over there at the LMHA more or less. I mean, I know their names. We've talked, so we know one another, and so we do have and have. It wasn't easy, but we have made progress to where we have representation from the LMHA at what we call our mental health dockets, where we try to, you know, kind of triage these people who have basically been brought to jail who have mental health needs. And so we also have certain individuals, as I heard you know, Judge Grizzard say, you know, defense lawyers who kind of have developed a little bit of expertise because they have their own experiences in dealing with professionally or personally other people who have mental health issues. So, you know, those are the people that kind of risen up to be very helpful in helping provide, you know, the defense aspect of these individuals. And then we have prosecutors that participate as well. You know, there's a lot of turnover in small counties, so there's a need to like re-educate people as you kind of go through these things. But really, everybody who's on the list there is very important, and you need to engage those people and identify those people to try to get them as part of your program.
Thank you so much. I want to clarify that community diversion coordinator program that Judge Henderson's talking about is a grant program that was offered to 3 counties.
Christy, if you've got time, you were talking about case managers. And so just recently, as part of kind of what I try to manage in Travis County, is that there is a downtown Austin community court. And I'm not sure how many folks are super familiar with that. And they actually even have a mobile court that they have now set up. And which is amazing. I was able to tour that at Sunrise Church last Friday, and I call it street court as opposed to street corn. And it's amazing because it's where the people are, and they have case managers, they have integral care, LMHAs in touch, as well as central health. And so that downtown Austin Community Court with Judge Coffey, we're trying to connect the people that they see and already have case managers and have well-funded case managers who stay with people for a long time, who are also some of our folks that are in the misdemeanor and felony side of the house. So we're trying to make that connection so that even if you don't, for us in Austin, because we are bigger, but you can even find it somewhere else because we know that we're servicing a lot of the same people. And so the community court downtown merely does Class C tickets, but it's a lot of the same folks. And so if they've got resources for case managers there, we need to make those connections to utilize where they already are. So.
Yeah, and that model is incredible. We could have a whole other webinar on that. But yesterday I was talking with some municipal prosecutors about that model and just some of the services they offer of keeping documents for people, a lot of services for people who are unhoused. Giving them an address and letting them use their phone, just some of those services that giving them that home base are just life-changing and really fabulous.
Yeah. They literally, I think, which is such a small thing, but it's so huge, is that they literally have 3 landlines sitting there at the court while you wait. And Judge Coffey said, local, long distance, doesn't matter. People can come in and pick up the phone and use it, and to stay, just something that we all take for granted until AT&T goes down yesterday.
Yeah.
Something that small to us is huge for those folks in that population. Because as we know, that homeless population is also the same population that we're dealing with on the behavioral health side.
So I'm going to move along. Train the team. We offer some training. I've heard different judges say they just had the core people on their team go through some of the All Rise training or BJA training that covers the basics. Identifying the participants, I think, is a big topic. And I want to turn to the judges for this. And we have some questions about, we've already heard, a little bit about the screening and whether or not they're doing that or not. What experiences have y'all had about offense type? And I've heard some courts say they start very low level and then they are able to work their way up as the community and the district attorney has more comfort. And then the questions in the chat are, how have you been able to work with folks with anosognosia who are unaware of their mental illness as a part of the mental illness? And then also people with IDD.
I'll take both of those, and I answered in the chat about the anosognosia that we haven't had tons of people. We can make them go to the local mental health authority and take their medications. You can get compliance on that. We hope it sticks. If they do it, then they complete. They've done what they undertook to do. We know they're going to likely discontinue, and that's something we rely on the service providers to engage them, but it's not large numbers.
Judge Henderson?
Most of the people that we deal with are individuals who are really have difficulties not only in understanding they have mental illness, but have the ability to effectively work a program like this. And so that's the majority of the people that we deal with. And we just try to figure out ways to deal with their basic acute needs, and see if we can work with the LMHA or whatever other programs are out there on a case-by-case basis, craft a solution based on that particular problem that person, is experiencing in the moment.
Thank you. What's your referral process? Where do you receive your referrals?
Well, in Grayson County, in my court, we identify these people as they're arrested. We are the referring entity to our own court because we see them when they hit the jail. And so it's we get them early from that perspective. Now, I think maybe in the district courts, referrals to that little program may be from other areas, but we're dealing with people who are apprehended in their like acute emergency situation. And that's how we kind of integrate them into what we're doing.
Sounds like another benefit of being both the misdemeanor docket and a smaller town that it's not as disconnected. I think sometimes it can be more disconnected and you have to have an official referral process.
Right. And like people who are on this call who are from smaller counties will understand, you see the same people over and over, and we know them. Like I was driving to work this morning and I saw, a young man who we just had a conversation about yesterday. He's on the street. I mean, and that's how it's different in a small county. And we don't have the volume of people to, justify the implementation of very sophisticated programs that they have in other counties. So we kind of try to deal with them on a individual, unique, need-based for that particular person.
Thank you. Judge Carr?
I also would remind, now in an urban county, we had most of the time more than we could say grace over, but when there were valleys, remember there is the Takumi sheet that is required for everyone coming into jail where they suspect that there may be mental illness. And so we made an agreement with the jail to get a regular report of people being booked in, because our Tarrant County is the third largest county in the state. So we have always a large number of people coming in. Most of our referrals, now my docket was both felonies and misdemeanors. Most of the referrals were from defense attorneys, although I did have judges, jailers, police officers we would even get the occasional call from police across the street. But even though you're the government, you still have to market your program, and you've got to make sure that there's an awareness of it, because I have made presentations about the mental health court. I'll be very brief, but I was at a defense luncheon. I made a presentation about the court. There was a guy sitting at the table right in front of me, and the next day he was in my court with a client who clearly had some mental health issues. And I asked him, well, did you consider the mental health court? And he gave me this deer in the headlights look, like, well, I didn't even know we had one. And like I say, he'd been sitting 15 feet away from me the day before when I was talking at it. So he's probably on a cell phone or something. But you do have to keep up with things. And you can, in this area, considering that over 50% of the people in custody would have a diagnosable mental health condition, finding a population should not be a problem.
Thank you. We definitely hear that some defense attorneys are reluctant. I know that Judge Needles, before she took the bench, was a former defense attorney. And if you would speak to that as to the struggle of following your client's direction and then also counseling them.
For sure. And it's not, and we are fortunate again in Travis County to have a private defender's office that are court-appointed attorneys, and there is a separate wheel for those that serve those with mental health issues. And so I think that's a huge benefit for us, and would recommend smaller counties to have said wheel, because even if, let's say you only have 50 practicing attorneys and you say, okay, well, just these 10 are trained in this mental health, well, that's 10 more than trying to train everybody. There are situations as an attorney that are very different, and it takes a very special person with a little more patience maybe than your typical attorney. I won't bash all the attorneys because I know some of us are married to them and things like that. But it does. I mean, that's sincere in that, and particularly having those attorneys trained, I think that helps. And then it's back to what we've all kind of been saying is that coordinating the services. If you have, say, 10 mental health attorneys in your county that you know they know everybody, you know they know the phone numbers, you know that they know the emails to contact folks to get these people help, then that's a big deal. I'm kind of looking in the chat too. What you're saying as well and asking is how do you get them to comply? Well, I think where we are messing up in that question to start with is that they're in the jail in the first place. Because if they, one, maybe are ill enough that they don't even know where they are, why they're there, what's going on. They may not have known whatever offense, depending upon whatever the level may be. And so I think really to solution that is, I don't think they should be in jail in the first part, but that's kind of pie in the sky. And I see that it also says that the LMHA kind of washes their hands. I think that's why we need to struggle to, in all counties, make it somewhere other than the jail that we have for people to go instead of just arresting them, because even arresting them in that crisis moment only makes it worse. We know that. I mean, even if it was, they take me to jail tomorrow for whatever I might have done, I'll be panicked. And so just even that, we know that those people in mental health crisis certainly can't understand where they are. And really quickly, Christy, because I know you got to keep us on time. I wanted to talk about the offense level and type for those who are from different counties. I know we hear lots of feedback from the community on the policy side of the house, like, oh, just start with the criminal trespasses, just start with this. Well, we do take felony cases, and there are felony cases that receive the diversion and the dismissal, as well as we were talking about earlier, is those who are on probation and aren't making their probation. And again, like Judge Grizzard said, anecdotally, I had a probationer in my court that was charged with an aggravated robbery, and young girl, very low functioning IQ wise, and she could not make her probation. I don't know why. It was before I was on the bench. I don't know why she was ever put on probation, but she was charged with an aggravated offense. And if she didn't complete her probation, she was going to go to the penitentiary. There wasn't anywhere else for her to go, but she was not at that point a danger to the society. She may not have been in the first place. She could have been in a crisis that was undiagnosed to start with. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that I don't want any county to think, oh, you just have to start with the criminal trespasses. No, look at all of them, because this girl that I'm talking about is we eventually got her services, got her into housing, but because of her low functioning IQ, she would also be taken advantage of. And so you just have to look at it closer and go say, what's really going on here, as opposed to just saying, oh, that's an aggravated robbery. We can't do anything mental health wise with that person because they're going to be a danger to society. And that's just not always the case. So on a policy.
Thank you. And on the question about the defendants in jail who refuse to speak to their doctor, refuse to talk to their attorney, that may be a question for the next class on competency restoration, because we have seen that the jails that are performing the involuntary medicine are seeing results. It's not something to be taken lightly. A lot of communities don't agree with it, but that if you can use that in just even the most extreme cases, when someone is that ill, that the involuntary medication does help.
Can I just make a quick comment on that, Christy? So one of the things that we learned in Grayson County is about the LMHA's Mobile Crisis Outreach Team. And so we see a lot of people land in our jail who really need to be hospitalized and probably should have been taken to the hospital to begin with, but for whatever reason, they weren't. And so we were able to make contact and kind of develop a procedure for the LMHA's Mobile Crisis Outreach Team anytime we felt like somebody was in that immediate need to come and look at them in the jail and hopefully authorize hospitalization so they could immediately get out of the jail. And that is a little bit of a complicated process when you have to like reset bonds that have been set by justice of the peace and all of that. But if you're having that problem in your county, that's a way to address it rather than have these individuals stay in jail for a week, 2 weeks, 3 months without any kind of medical treatment.
Thank you. And there was another question about if flagging a case for an individual as having mental health needs ended up being detrimental. And someone said in their county that once they're flagged, it takes 4 times as long to move them out of the jail. And my immediate response is that sounds like a process and education need for maybe a jail in-reach program and more coordination, that it shouldn't be serving as a barrier when we've identified someone's mental health. It really, we all know the goal is the opposite. Any comments on that one, judges?
The way I see it, attorneys are sometimes resistant to competency exams, hoping that people will restore or start taking their medications voluntarily. You can wind up on some minor case if the DA's office is not aware. People can spend more time hospitalized than they would ever spend on if they had care of their case. And the same thing is true with not guilty by reason of insanity people. And so there are some issues like that. But for a lot of people, having that designation or recognition that they have a mental health issue really helps them to get out of jail, because that's something a judge can look at and say, man, if you can get them hooked up, make them an appointment with integral care, what can you do in terms of housing? Where do they go when released? It can be part of a pitch to get somebody out.
Agreed. And we're hoping that they're using the bond process under CCP 17032. That's a shall, it's not discretionary. There's some conditions on it, but we're hoping that is in place. And I think, again, we'll talk more about this in the next class about competency restoration, that we have found as a state that using competency restoration for cases that are not a priority for the state to prosecute is really not helpful. That we know that people are going to time out before they ever reach the state hospital. So we'll get to more of that later. All right, let's get on to the next step in mental health court. So we have step 7 is to plan the program. One thing that's discussed a lot is incentives and sanctions. So we've heard a lot about individualized treatment plans, connecting people with services that they need. But if we could hear from the judges about what sort of creative incentives have you seen that's been helpful? We've heard about cake, even just cake and a party and a certificate and a graduation ceremony is something that some of these folks have never been able to experience and are very meaningful. So any good suggestions here, judges?
To me, and I certainly get that, and I see where you're going with that, but we have made great strides with the dismissal process. And I think that understanding that you are better, that you're taken care of, that there are people that care about you and that are proud of you when you do well, to me, that seems to go a really long way as well. To not have the history behind you and to not have the case on your record anymore is obviously amazing, but maybe not something that somebody can understand on a big time basis or in the future. I seem to find that more of the folks who are in the program and are stabilized on their medication and are connected with services, and just that actually somebody caring about them goes a really long way, which is, you would think that would be kind of a given in our society, but it's not necessarily the case. And unfortunately, I will even say that some of the judges, my peer judges that don't actually understand those folks with mental health needs, don't even understand that necessarily. And so that's that extra step that you need to go for those folks.
Judge Daniels, I think that's a wonderful point is, cake is great, but let's do the legal work if we can. Let's look at dismissal. Let's look at expunction. Let's help clean up the records for these folks that are successful as much as we can. And then also the point about other judges, that a lot of times the mental health court judge is a inspiration to other judges. And even if they are not going to create a mental health court themselves, I've seen other judges learn more about mental health, maybe educate themselves, come to that celebration, and approach all of their cases with maybe a different outlook. So I think it's an excellent model for influencing the entire judiciary in your community.
Well, and kind of what we were talking about with the defense attorney side of the house, that those, even if you have a small number that are extra skilled in mental health issues, even if you have 1 or 2 judges in your courthouse that are like, hey, you study up on this, you go to the JCMH summit. And then we know that, hey, even if that's not my cup of tea, I can send them over here to so-and-so's court and they know how to handle it. They know the resources, they know the people. I don't think it has to be, even if you don't do it yourself, somebody else doing it for you doesn't mean that you failed. It means that you did
Exactly.
better.
Yeah, great point. Judge Henderson?
I'm going to tell you an incentive that we have really just for the lawyers, because we don't, I'm not sure that we have really developed a successful incentive plan for the defendants, but what we've implemented in our county is uh, on our court-appointed attorney, we'll pay them a little more money to work on individuals with special needs. We've always had a kind of an extra amount of money that we pay them if they deal with individuals who speak another language. And this is kind of similar to that. And so we've implemented that. And so that's kind of a quick little incentive that you could probably implement as a judge fairly easily to give them an extra $100 per case or whatever you come up with that seems fair as an incentive for defense lawyers to kind of develop some expertise in the field.
I love that. I've never heard it compared to another language, but it is another language. Judge Card, I know you guys use some different incentives. I've heard you say movie tickets and different activities.
Well, I mean, there are whole from the All Rise website and a few other sources. There are whole papers or publications on sanctions and incentive, but but I kind of like to start at the beginning. Most about life is relationships, and I don't think that I'm as a person any more important than anyone else, put my pants on the same way, etc. But 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 as a judge, you may be the most important person that a participant in your courtroom ever meets. And just that starting point alone, once you develop that positive relationship, the fact that they are receiving positive feedback from a system that heretofore has always been primarily punitive in nature is the biggest starting point at all. But yes, we do other things. Life is a balance. Whereas I might be talking about my last vacation, I'm wearing my Alaska cruise shirt as we speak. But another person may be talking about the last time that they were in jail, or where they going to get the money to pay this month's rent, or what have you. So a bowling, there's ethical limits on everything for the judge to maintain a certain distance, talk for another day. But hamburger cookout in the park, reduction of community service hours, you're kind of rebalancing the scales to positive events, and you just have to be creative. And there really isn't anything that's too insignificant when you can give positive feedback. It's a great benefit to the participant, and a few positive words of encouragement will overcome a lot of negativity. I mean, you're there to be the judge at the end of the day, and sometimes be called upon to make tough decisions, but along the way, being very creative in how you recognize people. A round of applause that is something that in their life they have rarely seen. Of course, I've had it 100 times if I've had it once, but you just have to put the shoe on their foot sometimes and look at it from their perspective. And if you're truly interested in having good outcomes in your program, then you'll figure out a way that you can reinforce the good that you're doing, and that'll go a long way to success.
Thank you. Okay, we are wrapping up our 90 minutes, so I'm going to move on to the next step. So we have documenting your work, and hopefully JCMH can make this easier. We have a lot of forms that different courts are using, their handbooks, their MOUs, a lot of case plan templates. So hopefully we could make that easier. And let's see, did I miss a slide? Funding. Okay, how do we fund these courts? The state funding through the governor's office, Judge Carr knows a lot about that. He's had his court funded for many years and participated in that process. It has just closed. So if you have missed it for this year, it closed on February 8th, then you have time to start planning for next year. We created this toolkit that you can see that walks you through all the steps for state funding. For federal funding, there are some grants that have just announced through SAMHSA and BJA that look quite promising. And so we'll send out links to all of that after. One that Judge Carr made sure and noted for us today is there is funding through, this is through BJA, that is specifically for mental health courts, or I think at least mental health courts are encompassed in their definition. And you have time to work on this. This was just announced, and the deadline is in May for these two programs. And it's significant awards for a 3-year period.
I heard somebody at a presentation, and the bar's probably going to be mad at me, but they made an application to the Bar Foundation for funding to start. It would never have occurred to me to apply to the Texas Bar for funding to start a mental health program, but somebody did, and they got some money. So again, you just need to be scrubbing the same old places, and sometimes the COVID money is about to run out this year, I believe. And so check with your counties there and see if they have anything left in the pot, because again, for a lot of the things we're talking about, you don't need a lot of money. You need some money. And I will tell you that I started 4 programs. I didn't have a dime for any program that I started. It was all contributions by other entities that was willing to pick up that rag, give it an extra twist, and give it a few more drops out of it. And again, you also have to be creative.
Judge Henderson, Needles, do you have anything to add on this about funding? We've definitely heard that maybe you don't even have any extra funding, that you have the usual suspects. Maybe you have your probation department or your LMHA show up at your docket, but maybe not any extra funding to start.
I was going to say, I think what is the biggest challenge or hurdle is the coordination of that court. I mean, I think Judge Gozard had to jump off early at 1:15 as well. His court coordinator, coordinating all of those dates and those dockets, that's a big challenge. And so I think I would say that, and the people, because then they also have, the coordinator has to also wrangle all those folks and plan for them to be in the same room, or if it's Zoom or whatever the case may be. And so I would say I don't necessarily think you have to have a huge budget, but I think someone dedicated to the coordination, like we were talking about earlier. And if your county doesn't pay for it, if you have, or you get a grant to take care of that, I think that's big. Otherwise, I think you can draw, like our district attorney's office has now 2 dedicated mental health prosecutors in Judge Grizard's court all the time, but they also handle requests from the rest of the district courts. If we have somebody that we think should be on the mental health docket, our court and our prosecutors can ask those mental health prosecutors, hey, will you accept this person into your court or into your docket? And so it also, even if the court itself doesn't have the money, go to your DA's office, go to the county attorney's office, go ask them if they'll pitch in some people, go to your LMHA. say, hey, can I have some folks that go to the jail and say, hey, can y'all coordinate with this? And so let the other entities involved put some of the bill. I guess is what I'm saying, if you don't have any other resources.
Yes, that in-kind contribution is invaluable. Judge Henderson?
Well, I think I agree completely with what Judge Needles just said. I mean, you're drawing on the support of so many different organizations that, you know, you need to find the people that can like plug into this idea of you know, addressing individuals with mental health needs. I would just like reemphasize what I said earlier is like what really got us jump started was finding one person who could come in and kind of provide like some direction and some organization to this whole very, you know, difficult, complicated, complex situation that you deal with individuals in the mental health, you know, mental health, intersection of mental health and the criminal justice system. And so, you know, we found a grant, but and I'm sure there are things that are out there to pay for that sort of thing. There are a lot of grants out there, honestly.
There are. Thank you. Okay, so we are wrapping up the final steps. We have register with the court, and that is just a form you can find on our website or on OCA's website. And we heard earlier that maybe when you start, you're not fully registered. The benefit of being registered is to be eligible to receive funding from the governor's office. But perhaps not being registered provides more flexibility. Okay, so we have just a few minutes left, and I'd ask the judges if they have any parting tips, anything we haven't covered yet.
I think the parting tip that I would have is like for individuals people who are in smaller counties like ours, educate yourself, you know, figure out a way to learn about this process. There's a lot of information out there, but if it's going to be implemented, it's going to need to be implemented by you. And so, you know, educate yourself because it's important to learn about this.
Thank you. And I would also thank you, judges, because we know that when a judge champions a cause, it is much more likely to happen. So we have, you know, prosecutors and defense attorneys and law enforcement that can be interested in this, but it is key, I think, to align yourself with a judge that has a heart for this. Judge Needles?
I try not to tell stories because I sound like an old judge when I do this, but a recent story that I think kind of sums up what I would hope everybody would get out of it. And I think if you don't have judges in your county that would think this way similarly, then send them to me and I'll help them out. Just recently, we had a probationer and he was on for a felony assault of some sort. I want to say it was family violence, but obviously a felony charge. So significant pen time as what would happen if he really messed up his probation. His mother was dying of cancer. And so when he was out on bond on this probation, trying to get it together, his mother gets sicker and sicker. And so then he goes back to using drugs. And so I know we're not he didn't have a serious mental health diagnosis, but he obviously had a substance use diagnosis and that it was triggered by his mother's impending death. He came back to jail because he was arrested again because he didn't report to probation, all within a month's time period. And he had been to his family and was so messed up on drugs, his family wouldn't see him. Said, no, you can't be around the mother. She's dying. She doesn't need your grief right now. All this gets back in jail. And all he wanted, he knew he was going to have to go to Safe P, which is a lockup facility, which I will say that I don't know that that's the best treatment in the world that you get, but that's unfortunately what it is that we use in Texas when there's no other alternatives. But he knew that that was the only thing that he could do to keep his probation. But all he really wanted was to get out and see his mother one last time. Now, he's on a scary felony. He'd already messed up twice. His attorney wasn't even sure his mother would see him. Attorney makes the call. Yes, his mother will see you. I said, okay, I'll let you out for 2 days. And then you've got to turn yourself back in. I think the state nearly, you know, spit their water out. They were drinking at the time thinking, how could you do this? How could you, are you a crazy judge? And I thought, well, yeah, sometimes too. And so he promised he would go see her for 2 days and turn himself back in and go to Safe P. In fact, he actually did that. We let him out on a Wednesday. He saw his mother, was able to say his goodbyes, and then came back on a Friday to go into custody and go on to safety, which was going to be a year-plus commitment for him reaching some sobriety. But obviously, lockup facility, so it was jail, right? And as we expected, his mother passed away the week after. And he went back in, did what he needed to do. My point being is that in that moment, when I said, I will let you out to go do this, I knew that if I didn't do that, the trauma, particularly from him being in and never being able to say his goodbyes to his mother, that was not going to, that wasn't going to serve him. The fact that he had somebody looking at him and saying, I understand you, I get you, I feel for you, just like Judge Carr said, we put our pants on the same way, we're humans just the same. And to give that trust to me is what we all need to do and practice every day, was my point, is to look past the, what are you charged with? What is necessarily a diagnosis? What money don't we have to put to this problem? It's really just being kind to humans and doing what you can in that space. Now,
Well, thank you. And it takes a lot of bravery. It takes a lot of courage to do that.
I think somebody who's understanding of people is what it takes to actually make it work. So I appreciate you for having us on today. Thank you, Christy.
Well, that is a wonderful, I think, example to end on. Thank you, Judge Henderson, Judge Needles, and we also thank Judge Grizzard, Judge Carr for their contributions today. So thank you all and have a wonderful weekend.